It's time for our KSAT Q&A, and a large part of what we're going to be talking about in this segment is body cam footage that officers wear when they're involved in some of these violent incidents. When should it be released? When can it be released? Paul Watler joins us now from the Freedom of Information Foundation of Texas. He's an attorney. He's been on the board. He's a past president. Talk about what this organization, this nonprofit organization, does, Mr. Watler.
Sure, Steve. Just as you said, we are a nonprofit organization with our headquarters in Austin. The foundation has been around for over 40 years now, and basically attempts to educate members of the public about their rights to public information, particularly under the Texas Public Information Act, the Federal Freedom of Information Act, advocating that both the public and the media should have the right to have information that's of vital public concern. In fact, the public owns the information, and police agencies, governmental agencies actually collect information in the name of the people. And in our state, we have a statute that says that information request. So our nonpartisan, nonprofit organization primarily tries to educate folks about how they apply in particular situations.
Let's talk about body cam footage specifically. We have seen released body cam footage and some pretty high-profile incidents that have happened recently, and there seems to be some misconceptions or some confusion about what state law allows when it comes to law enforcement releasing or choosing not to release body cam footage. Can you clear that up?
Yeah, certainly. Texas law, which is by statute passed by the legislature several years ago, allows a law enforcement agency, number one, the law allows a law enforcement agency to operate a body-worn camera program. It sets out guidelines in which police departments, sheriff's offices, law enforcement agencies around the state can adopt policies to actually have body-worn cameras carried by officers in the performance of their duties, and provide some guidelines about that. But once that sort of body-worn camera policy is in place, the law says that a law enforcement agency can withhold video of a critical incident in its discretion. But it also gives those law enforcement agencies the discretion to release video if they choose to do it. So basically, law enforcement agencies are not required to withhold body-worn camera information, with some exceptions. There is a requirement to withhold it if the video was shot, say, within the confines of a home. But most of these incidences are taking place out on the street, out in a public place. So when there's not a private home situation, law enforcement agency will have the discretion to withhold it if they choose to withhold it, or the discretion to release it. And I would just add, one of the underlying policy reasons to have a statute like this is the belief that the public will be well served, and that confidence in law enforcement will be strengthened in the long run over the course of time if the public sees how law enforcement executes its very serious responsibilities. So I think, even though there is discretion to withhold things, there is well-founded reasons to release this video as well.
The Bexar County Sheriff, right after an incident involving Damian Daniels, a fatal incident where a deputy shot and killed him, said that they were going to be transparent, they were going to release it, then just last week said, no, we're going to wait for an attorney general opinion.
Yeah,
he doesn't have to do that, does he?
Well, yes and no. If there's, again, a law enforcement agency would have the discretion to release information. But if there is a concern that there may be information that is deemed confidential by law under our Public Information Act, then an agency can and is empowered to make a request to the Attorney General for a ruling on that. So if there's, sometimes information can be partly public information, undisputedly, and sometimes it can be, part of it could be confidential. So if there's a situation where perhaps there's a question of whether there's some confidential information there, something that would invade someone's personal privacy. And that's, usually not the case when an incident takes place, say, in a city street or in a public place. There's usually not questions of personal privacy involved there. But there certainly can be situations where it's appropriate to ask for an attorney general opinion.
We know that in the Damian Daniels case that Steve mentioned, the Daryl Zamalt case with SAPD recently, there has been some pushback in releasing body cam footage. It has not come easily, to say the least. Can you give us some perspective on perhaps what some other Texas cities do? What policies do agencies around Texas have in place when it comes to releasing footage like that?
Well, of course, the main policy we've had in place for these last number of years, since the mid 2015, is the state statutes that govern this. There is some leeway within those statutes for, as I mentioned earlier, I mean, each law enforcement agency can choose to release body-worn camera footage if they choose to. In Dallas, and I happen to be resident in Dallas and practice law there, in the wake of the George Floyd incident and the protests that ensued over that incident, the city of Dallas Police Department adopted a policy where on its face they intend to release body-worn camera footage within 72 hours of an incident. Now, I will say that policy has only been on the books for 6 or 8 weeks at this point, and it still remains to be seen about how much transparency that will really engender, because the police department also basically reserved all of its rights to withhold information, withhold video if it chooses to do so. So it certainly is a step towards transparency, and if video camera footage, body camera footage becomes available within 72 hours, I think that'll be a good thing in the eyes of many members of the public.
Absolutely. Attorney Paul Watler with the Freedom of Information Foundation of Texas. Thank you for joining us. You're going to be back with us on the Night Beat. And I want to talk a little bit more about an op-ed that you wrote for the Dallas Morning News talking about body cameras. We'll talk about that tonight at 10.
You bet.
Thank you for your time.
We'll be right back.